Hello, I'm Dr. K.J. Uman, a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Neurology of the University of Arizona and the director of the Epilepsy Clinic at the University Medical Center. I have a story to share with you today. It's the story of a young man. It's the story of his courage and determination. It's the story of a family, its patience and endurance through the illness of two of its members. But first, let me tell you a few words about the disease that brought this brave family to my attention. Epilepsy is one of the oldest recorded ailments of mankind. It results in a behavioral syndrome that we call a seizure, the word having its origin from the beliefs of the ancient cultures that it resulted from possession of the human body by evil spirits. The presentation of a seizure beginning with a premonition or an aura, an eerie cry, and the tonic and clonic contortions of the body, followed by urinary or fecal incontinence, is one of the most awkward and embarrassing experiences for the patient and a frightening specter for the unfamiliar observer. No wonder the drama of this disease has caught the imagination of artists and artisans alike through the centuries. Pictured here is an early 19th century engraving called The Epileptic. It captures the various emotions that the disease elicits in the general public, ranging from fear to philanthropy. It was John Hewlings Jackson, the father of British neurology, who gave us the first mechanistic definition of epilepsy. Jackson wrote that epilepsy was the result of an excessive aberrant discharge from damaged neurons. Jackson classified the seizures into partial and generalized. In a partial seizure, there is an isolated area of the brain that discharges abnormally. In generalized seizures, there is simultaneous activation of the entire brain. In a partial seizure disorder with a focal electrical discharge, an ordinary EEG done in our laboratory may show abnormal activity as seen in this tracing. When that isolated focus becomes continually activated, it may spread to the neighboring parts of the brain as seen in this recording. Such a discharge of sufficient duration will result in behavioral changes in the opposite side of the body in the form of abnormal sensations or abnormal movements that may spread to the rest of the body. These may also result in anxiety, nausea, fear, memory loss, or déjà vu phenomena, or involuntary facial movements. Spreading of the electrical activity to the entire brain will result in a generalized convulsion, commonly known as a grand mal, as depicted in this drawing from the Salpêtrière in France. This condition afflicts approximately 1.4 million Americans. For them, it interferes with their ability to drive an automobile, secure an employment, lead a productive life, and enjoy the fullness of opportunities as afforded by the modern civilization without the help of a caring physician. About half of the patients become seizure-free on medication. The other half can look forward only to partial control. Depending on the source, about 10 to 30% of them are considered intractable, despite the availability of modern anti-epileptic medications. Dr. George Ogerman of the University of Washington estimates that there are about 400,000 such patients in the United States. The ordinary approach of a CAT scan or an MRI and an EEG does not suffice for the evaluation of these patients. The evaluation of these patients must go beyond an educated guess. As many as 20% of the so-called intractable epilepsy patients may have a condition that masquerades as epilepsy or may simply be suffering from an emotional disorder. A lube, oil, and filter change approach, as provided by a family physician or even a neurologist, is inadequate for the management of the dilemma presented by these patients. These patients require intensive neurodiagnostic monitoring in a hospital bed by means of closed-circuit television monitoring with simultaneous EEG, popularly known as CCTV EEG. Scalp EEG performed with electrode application, as in routine EEGs, or with electrodes implanted into the brain itself by a neurosurgeon. Patients undergo continuous EEG monitoring by the use of scalp or depth electrodes for prolonged periods of 1 to 3 weeks, with television cameras focused on them for continuous surveillance so that a recording can be obtained while the patient is undergoing a seizure. Review of the seizure saved on a videotape with the concurrent EEG data displayed on a TV monitor enables the epileptologist to correlate the electrical activity, if any, to the behavioral seizure. It also enables the localization of such electrical activity to its precise source of origin. Such a focus can then be removed surgically by a neurosurgeon, provided it does not result in unacceptable neurologic impairment. This slide shows a single unit required at the monitoring station to surveil one patient, as it is done at the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, Georgia. This is a panoramic view of their central control room that can monitor 4 patients at the same time. This is a mobile data acquisition card, MODAC as it is called, designed by Telefactor, which is being used at the bedside in the pediatric unit at the Medical College of Georgia. The young man I told you about is David Mayhall. He was referred to me due to his intractable epilepsy. He was then started on an experimental medication which afforded only partial control. As a result, we discussed the alternative of epilepsy surgery. At about the same time, his mother became ill with cancer of the liver. After having gone through the rigors of chemotherapy, she knew the end was near. One day she called me and said, "Dr. Ullman, I don't have a lot of time left. David and the rest of us in the family have decided to go ahead with the surgery for him." And that's what he did. Pamela did not live to see David have the operation. She expired on June 28, 1988. David had the operation on December 16, 1988. He then decided to tell his story and has done it so eloquently that he won the 2nd place at the Pima College Media Arts presentation. This is David Mayhall. David?
Hi, the name of my video is My Conquest Over Seizures. I made it to show other patients and the public what I went through and a possibility that they might have of getting a seizure-free life. The award I won was in the documentary section at the Pima Awards. And my mother, she was able to know that I had the chance of getting this seizure-free life. She didn't see she wasn't there for the surgery, but she did know that's the last thing she heard before she died. You'll see my father telling his side of the story in this video too. It's the best way I knew how to make this statement known, to show my conquest over seizures.
I'm David Mayhall. My fight against seizures led me to brain surgery that gave me a 70 to 80% chance of a seizure-free life. Dr. K.J. Ullman of the University Medical Center in Tucson, Arizona, placed me in contact with Dr. A.V. Delgado-Escueda of the UCLA Reed Neurological Center in Los Angeles, California. After consultation and examination, I was accepted in the comprehensive epilepsy program at UCLA Reed Neurological Center. This video will show the series of tests which last a 6-month period before the surgery. The tests are used to find the location in the brain that causes the patient's seizures and to determine if removal of the location is a possible solution.
Taking place in an office such as this, neuropsychological testing is used to check the patient's memory. Paired associated cards were the first to be used on me. Other examples are missing part pictures. This drawing is missing the faucet on one of the sinks, a metal pattern of drilled holes, and block designs similar to these. The positron emissions tomography or PET scan uses a radioactive dye of sugar and isotope and scans the brain in sections to find the spots in the brain that will not metabolize the sugar, giving a physiological view of the brain through the use of computers. For the computerized tomography scan, also known as the CAT scan or CT scan, the head is entered into a donut-shaped scanner. Rotating around the head, the CAT scan focuses X-ray beams through the head at different angles and levels. The computer analyzes the data to produce a composite or complete three-dimensional picture from which a slice or section of the brain can be shown. The magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, is a group of 3 tests. Radio and magnetic waves pass through the head in different directions to get a 3-dimensional and analogical view of the brain without the use of X-rays. The equipment setup for the MRI is similar to the PET scan and CAT scan. The MRI will be very noisy and loud. The CAT scan and PET scan are not as loud. It is very important not to move during these tests. The most comfortable position I found for the PET scan, CAT scan, and MRI was to have my arms resting on my chest and my eyes closed. Video telemetry tests, phase 1 and 2, use videotapes to compare the physical and the electrical view of seizures. Seizures are induced for this test. Preparation for phase 1, the most common of the video telemetry test, begins by marking places on the scalp. Collodion glue is used to place 24 electrodes on the scalp for the EEG. No hair is cut for this phase. A dull needle is used to scrape the skin and insert electrode conductive gel under the electrodes. Inserting new gel later will avoid crystallization of the gel. Using a hollow needle, sphenoidals similar to this are placed about 1.5 inches into each jaw joint. The needle is pulled back out over the sphenoidal wiring. Sphenoidals are used to check the lower temporal media part of the brain during phase 1.
Phase 2 is not used for all patients. 6 holes about the size of dimes were drilled into various areas of my skull to place 32 electrodes under my skull next to my brain. The electrode wiring ran on top of my skull under the skin to the back of the head where 3 exit holes were made in the skin. The number of electrodes and their location sites are determined from phase 1 and will vary for each phase 2 patient. This information and information from phase 3 was given to me by Dr. Paul S. Dwan of Santa Monica Hospital. For phase 1 and 2, the irregular seizure medication is reduced to cause seizures. If seizures have not occurred, in 2 or 3 days, stress is built up to help start the seizures.
Riding a bike daily and sleep deprivation, allowing 3 hours of sleep per night, are two ways used to build stress to cause seizures. The equipment for the video telemetry test must be on 24 hours a day. Cameras always face the patient, giving two physical points of view on one videotape. EEG readings give an electrical point of view on a second videotape. The physical and electrical points of view are compared when studying a seizure. The nursing bay, located in the hallway of Santa Monica Hospital, controls one of the two cameras in each room of the neuroepileptic unit to watch the patients. During phase 1, an electrical card and plug box are placed on the head and is wrapped with a dressing to hold them in place. Phase 2 uses a combination of two dressings. First, the scalp is sterilized, treated with betadine solution, and bandaged. Two 16-channel terminals are placed on the head and secured with a second bandage. Children will wear a vest to hold the terminals. Changing trays are used to change dressings every 2 to 3 days.
Phase 2 is definitely a lot longer process than phase 1 was. Phase 1 was fairly easy because they glued the electrodes, 24 electrodes to your head. You had two sphenoidals through the jaw to check the underneath part of the brain. In phase 2, the sphenoidals were used because they have 32 circuits up in the underneath the skull, wiring up the brain itself through 6 different folds or implants in the head, about the size of dimes.
The nursing job for phase 1 and 2 are similar. An important part of a nurse's job is providing the patient and his family emotional support during the hospital stay. Headaches and cerebrospinal fluid leakage are checked, as are the patient's neuroscience and vital signs. When a seizure occurs, the nurse gives the patient a name to remember after the seizure and takes notes on the seizures for the doctors to compare with the videotapes used. The hospital will tape seizures in phase 1 and 2 with split-screen video. The angiogram is a test that takes x-rays of the neck and head to map out the blood vessels. A dye is inserted through the femoral artery in the groin area. Afterward, for 8 hours or longer, the patient must remain flat, turning only to the sides, with the legs straight to heal the artery. After the angiogram, the WADA test will be used to place half the brain asleep for a few minutes. Psychometric tests and an EEG are used to find where the speech, memory, and other functions are controlled, and if surgery would cause a problem. Both sides of the brain are tested.
The doctors meet to study the test results and decide if surgery is possible. It was determined that I would have a 70 to 80% chance of a seizure-free life and have had the surgery done. Phase 3 is the surgery. After entering the skull, a grid will be placed in the opening to verify the exact portion of the brain to be removed. A portion of the left temporal lobe of my brain was removed to give me the chance of a seizure-free life. I worked on a hook rug during phase 1 and phase 2. Having something to do with my hands helped me pass the time away. The video telemetry tests were the most difficult for me to complete because seizures were induced both for phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 was difficult also because of the nausea and headaches I had. Although I had headaches and my vision was out of focus for a while after phase 3, the surgery and recovery was the easiest for me to complete. Scars left after the staples are removed from phase 2 and 3 will be covered by hair.
I'm David's dad. David has had his seizure problem ever since he was 2 years old. He had what they thought was viral encephalitis, which left him with his seizure disorder. At the time, we didn't know how that would affect all of us, but throughout the years, we've had some strange things happen to us and some hardships. But we've always looked at it as an inconvenience on his part, but nothing that he couldn't overcome or couldn't work with. Our whole family's been geared to helping him throughout this whole ordeal. He went through grade school just fine. He didn't have very many seizures. At that time, he was controlled by phenobarbital, which worked real well until he started in his teen years. When he went into junior high and high school is when he really noticed that the seizure problem was really affecting him badly. I would get calls from the school to come and get him because he had a seizure. They didn't know how to handle it, and sometimes they would even call the paramedics to come and get him and take him to the hospital. He's been a good student. In fact, he makes all A's and B's, and he's very, very bright, and he too has always looked at it as sort of an inconvenience, but anything that he wanted to do, he was able to do. He's very good in music. He plays drums, piano, and guitar. He sang in all the high school choruses and in college choruses. He went on field trips to Phoenix, to California, and all over Arizona. And even though he would have a seizure on some of these, it was just an inconvenience. We were real glad when we found out that there was a possibility of an operation that would solve this problem for David. My wife was the first one. Well, Dr. Uman, which is his doctor now, suggested that there might be a doctor in California that could operate on him and help alleviate this problem. His name's Dr. Escueda, and my wife, before she passed away, called this Dr. Escueda and made all the appointments necessary for us to go over last June and start the process of this operation. On June 27th, my daughter and myself and David flew over to California to have our first meeting with the Epilepsy Center at UCLA and Reed Neurological Center. We met with Dr. Escueda, and at that time he was evaluated that David was indeed a candidate for an operation. At that time, they weren't sure exactly how much they would have to take out of his brain to solve the problem. So they scheduled several months of tests. At first, while we were over there, at that time we did an MRI scan and a couple of other things, and they did an evaluation. And at that time, it was really hard for us too. My wife passed away, and it was hard on David. But we were committed to this project. That's what his mother wanted, and that's what David wanted. David's attitude has always been real good. He's willing, he wants to live a normal life, and to do that meant that we'd have to go through with this. We went through the first session of where they fastened the probes to his head, and that was scary too. And we had some fun times too. But each of the process, you lose a little, you cry a little, but your heart's in it, and you want to go on. And David, there again, he's still committed. He wants to solve the problem. We came back home after that, and they called us, and they said that they didn't get enough of the electrodes to pinpoint accurately where the problem in the brain was. So we were committed to come back to California again and on this time, they were actually going to drill holes in his head. And that was indeed scary. Dave, he stood it, and he was very brave. I'd have to go out of the room and cry a little bit every once in a while, but we let him drill the holes, and they put 32 probes up around his brain. And they took him off all his medication, and he had, I think, 25 or 30 seizures. The hospital was really glad that some parents were there, because I could tell them exactly what he was going to do and how he was going to react, and that would help them in solving the problem too, and knowing what to do about it. This time they were really successful, and they did map out the area that they thought that they were going to take out. We went home again, and this was in August, and we came back again in October. And we had to do a water test, which is, on that, you know, they put the brain to sleep and decide which side of his brain operated the speech and the manual. And in David's case, both sides of the brain did that. And so we were lucky, because his problem was on the left side of his brain, and that's normally where your speech pattern is and your motor pattern is. So we're committed still, and throughout the whole process, we always told David it's up to him. If at any time, at any point, he wants to call it off, there was no problem about it. We'd call it off and just be better for what we had already. But there again, he was committed, and we're all committed. So in December, they decided that's when the operation was going to be. It was really hard on me. It's, I guess the idea of taking part of your brain out, it just scares you to death. You don't know what's going to happen. But we were committed to this, so we went back, and this operation turned out to be much simpler than the part where they drilled the holes. David, even though it was a 10-hour operation, and we were all on pins and needles, we had all the relatives we could muster in the hospital, it turned out that the first thing he recognized was his father. We had a lot of family out at California when David was operated on the last time. But when they wheeled him out of the recovery room, his dad was the first person he recognized of the whole family, and then his grandmother. And that was a good feeling, because you knew everything was all right. He could still talk, and he could still see, he could still remember. It's been hard for all of us, but I think the family attitude has been that even though it was hard, nothing was impossible. And even there's been some funny things throughout the years that you just have to laugh about. Like one time David was at an all-state concert, and he had a seizure. They're up there singing. He falls off the top tier in the middle of the concert. The concert continues. I go running up on the stage and taking care of David. The concert ends. The director doesn't know what to do, but he comes over and shakes my hand and goes back out and takes a bow. So these things are all funny, and you got to remember the good things too, and keep it light. But most of all, David now is much brighter. He's excited. He wants to get on with his life, and that's what we've all prayed for. And I just hope that he continues to be seizure-free and will have all the things that he's ever wanted. And I'm sure his mom is happy about all that, too. And most of all, I'm proud of my son.
It's been almost 5 months since my surgery, and I haven't had a seizure since then. Everything's going really well. A lot more sure of myself than I was before the surgery. I'm able to finish my thoughts. Don't have to have people finish them for me and fill in the blank. I rode on a fair ride at the Spring Fling Carnival. I never rode on before because I was afraid I'd have a seizure on it. It's the best ride I ever went on. It's a lot of fun. I've had 2 pairs of sunglasses previous to this that broke because of seizures. I'm not afraid that I'm going to break these. The best thing I'm looking forward to is this. December 16th of this year will be a full year of no seizures, which means I'll be able to get a learner's permit to learn to drive this car. It's waiting for me. I can't wait. Hey, Stacy, come on, sing. Help me with this.
Why?
Come on, Stacy.
Alright.
Let's start from the beginning.
Oh, what a good idea.
All right. I get that all the time. This video is dedicated to the memory of my mother, Dr. Pamela D. Mayhall, Ph.D. I'd like to thank those involved with the California Comprehensive Epilepsy Program for giving me this chance of a seizure-free life and for making this video possible. And special thanks to neurosurgeons Paul S. Dwan, J. Ronald Rich, and Gregory O. Walsh for the fine job they did.